So you get the vaccine, and then 5 days later, what happens?
I wake up one morning, loud tinnitus, my nerves on fire from head to toe, and I have really no idea what's going on. I visited many doctors. I felt suicidal. I mixed up the drugs and knew I had to do it before he came home.
I want this story to be encouraging because you found hope and you got
Yes.
past it.
When Dr. Nat Alvarez said, "This is how we know what you've got. Your other blood tests are fine, everything's fine, MRI's fine, chest x-ray's fine, but your brain is damaged." That gave me great validation and proved to my family and friends who did not believe me were the brain scans. And I look back every month and I go, oh my gosh, I'm better than last month. I'm better than last month.
Wow. I know your story is going to be used. I do want to encourage everybody to check out this book. Welcome to the React 19 podcast, where we bring awareness and support to the COVID-19 vaccine injured and discuss the science, research, and laws that affect all of us. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us again today. I'm Ann Forty with the React 19 podcast, and today my guest is Lynette Milakovich. Lynette received her second Pfizer vaccine on March 31st, 2021, and just within 5 days started having sudden and intense symptoms that literally started to take her life away. She then basically lived through a nightmare over the next year and a half, being told by many doctors, family members, and a few friends who just kind of kept telling her she was crazy, bipolar, menopausal, or having a nervous breakdown. And because there were times because of all of that, there were times that Lynette even considered taking her own life. But fortunately for Lynette, she found life-giving help that dramatically brought her life back. And she's here today to tell us about her story and the book that she has written, My Story, the COVID-19 Vaccine and Brain Damage. Lynette, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Ann.
Yes, and it's not really that often that I get to interview people who've been injured by the COVID vaccine who have found really profound healing like you have. And so I'm hoping that this interview gives people a lot of hope. But I do want to say what was so gut-wrenching about your story and every other vaccine injured story is that you guys had to wait for so long for people to believe you, and just the hell that you endured just in your, thinking, what's going on? And the fact that our government knew that these issues were happening, but failed to notify the medical community and others to say, hey, if you see these issues, know that they might be caused by the vaccine. And so that was really, just again, in reading your story, I thought this poor woman and every other person, I mean, well, you're going to tell us all about that. So why don't we begin by you sharing, why did you think it was a good idea to get the vaccine? What was your motivation? And, to
Well,
start there at the beginning.
at the time, my husband and I lived in California, and very much more on the left, say, and pushing the vaccines. Of course, as most people know, how much we were shut down. The masks. Yeah, it was. So you're thinking what they're telling you is, for somebody else, get this vaccine for somebody else, and that was my whole thing. I had always been fit, in great shape. I know my immune system was very good. I was not concerned about dying from the COVID virus.
And certainly not from the vaccine.
No, not at all. And so, we just went along with it and put my hand up and said, oh, I'll go do this. And I trusted our government. I trusted our pharmaceutical company. Of course, since then, having done a lot of research and in touch with what happened during that time, I no longer have any trust in that. And so that's just in
And
what
I
I went through.
and I think people need to hear your story as to why. So I mean, this isn't all about, oh, we just want to bash people. No, or, we don't want to, what we want to do is bring answers and help, and just even to say to, the agencies and the medical professionals, listen, we want to help. And the best way to build trust is by listening and offering people hope. So,
Absolutely.
so you get the vaccine, and then 5 days later, what happens?
I wake up one morning, loud tinnitus, my nerves on fire from head to toe, and I have really no idea what's going on. Um, it was just the strangest thing. And then by the time I went to sleep that night, I absolutely could not fall asleep at all. It just like my sleep system shut down, and that was odd to me. I was such a great sleeper before, and so then I started looking for natural products to sleep, and none of that helped. I eventually, within probably 2 weeks, went to my primary care physician and told her what was happening, and she had no idea what was going on, and but gave me trazodone, which still I couldn't sleep very much. There were very, very little drugs that helped me to sleep. And I went through a lot of them. I kept going, and I was just beside myself at what is happening here. And I was trying to live my life of working out every day, teaching yoga. I was a court reporter, and we were doing most things on Zoom because of COVID. So I probably kept that up for a year before I finally could not retain any longer.
Wow. You went that
The
long.
Yeah, and then the yoga practice, there being a yoga teacher, that was something I had to stop. I stopped within the month or 2 because I
A
wasn't
month or
sleeping.
two after being injured? After your shot?
Yes,
Okay. Okay.
yes, because I couldn't put poses together. I didn't have that same, like, um, I don't know how to say it,
An ability to,
yeah, to teach and
the
to get the
cognitive
feeling.
ability to put it all together, right?
Yes, on for the yoga and the sleep issue. So I stopped that. I kept on trying to work out, but I had POTS. Now I know it was POTS. My heart rate would race, and I didn't know what was going on. I thought maybe it's the medication I'm taking. I visited many doctors. I finally got a primary care doctor after I kind of had an issue with, which is in my book about with the first primary care,
Yes.
just really
Very,
kind of
who was
ignored me.
quite rude.
Yes. So I went to him, and he was very caring. But he didn't know what was going on. And I asked him about the vaccine, and he said, we just don't know enough about it. I went to psychiatrists. I actually went to an outpatient therapy for 5 weeks.
Well, I think we should mention that, because basically what you were being told, and even, encouraged by your family members, is, we think this is kind of all in your head and you just need to get out of it. And so, even though, you're struggling with all these physical things going on, and you are willing to do anything. I mean, in your book, you can tell hey, I'll do whatever you say. I'll do, I just want to be better. And if we think therapy is the issue, whatever it is, you were motivated to do whatever it took. And at some point, I'd like you to share that story of being in therapy and about people who didn't want you there. I don't know
Sure.
what, you might need to preface that a little bit as to how you got there or when that was. But I think that was, I can't imagine your desperation in that point, but I
Oh
thought it
yeah.
was a very important story to share.
So the first outpatient was June of 2021. So about 2 months after having these symptoms, I felt suicidal. So that was a lot of the feeling I felt, was I just felt suicidal. And it was very different, say, than just depression. It was so different. And I've not been really suicidal before. I've had some depression in my life.
Right.
So I know what that feels like, but I could not process at this therapy group. But I saw a psychiatrist also who prescribed different medications for sleep. So I went to that for 5 weeks and nothing changed. So then, let's see. So I went about another year of just struggling going to doctors and changing medications, trying to figure out what's going on. I mean, my thyroid levels were going up and down. My blood pressure levels were skyrocketing. I always had low blood pressure and they were skyrocketing. I thought was having a heart attack a few times.
And it's all in your head.
It's all in my head.
Right.
Yes. And so I ended up it was June of 2022 that I actually tried to take my life. And I had Googled about the pills to take and
Yeah, recount that story.
sure.
That is a very poignant story, and it's one that I would like the vaccine injured to hear, as well as those who's not, because you were so close, but
Yeah.
yet today just to provide that hope that
Okay.
please share that story.
So the suicidal feelings were a lot, maybe every day. And my husband was a police officer, had guns in the house. I'd never really touched any of the guns, but I looked a few times and I thought that's something I just wouldn't do it that way. So I Googled how to take some medication and I had leftover medication from some surgery a couple years before. And I was just at that point, I had told my husband that I felt suicidal many times, and he just felt helpless, like he didn't know what to do. Um, I had before that time, before trying to take my life, I had gone to some mental health facilities just to try to check myself in the LA area and Inland Empire, and was turned away saying, you don't belong here. Um, I just wanted help. I wanted help. And I was so afraid I was going to kill myself. And then that morning, my husband went to get the car repaired, and I said, that's it. And I mixed up the drugs and knew I had to do it before he came home. And I put a rosary in my hand, drank the drink, and went to sleep. Said my last Hail Mary, prayed to God, and said, God, I know you don't want me to go through this torture of life, and I'm ready to come to you. And so I really thought I was going to die. And then people couldn't get a hold of me, my daughter, my husband. So my husband knew something was up and he called his friend to come check on me. And his friend found me with my arm out, the rosary on the floor, called the paramedics. I was transferred to the hospital. Hospital kept me probably overnight. I'm not sure how long of a period it was, but my sister came, my dad came, some other people, other maybe family members and some friends came. And I was unconscious until I woke up in the psychiatric ward when they finally found me a bed. And that's what so I learned of all this stuff through other people. I interviewed my family and friends about how things came about. And there were a few things that happened while I was unconscious. It's strange because I guess when you're like that, you do wake up, but you're not really awake because I didn't know what I was saying. And my husband asked me, why did you do this? And I said, I don't want to be like my mother. My mother had uh, was mentally ill and had some real demons. And I just thought, people are saying you're turning out like your mother and, that kind of thing. So then another thing that happened was, so I'll go back. My husband's oldest son, David, had been troubled most his life. And at 43 years old, he was found on his bedroom floor and by his roommates, and his roommates called the ambulance and he was taken to the hospital in the Victorville area, and he was pronounced dead. Now he had been into methamphetamine and had gone to state prison, and we thought he was doing better. He had been off parole for 9 years. He had gone to be a counselor for parolees. He was really into Jesus Christ and teaching these parolees how to live. And I thought it was just because he was heavy, and he didn't live a heavy, a good life, and he just wasn't healthy. And I was thinking it was from a heart attack. Well, we found out 9 months later that it was from an overdose of methamphetamine. So anyway, we lost David. That was 2018 in January. And so going back to when I was in the hospital, out of the blue, I talked to David and he told me it's not my time yet. So it was
Oh
such
my
an odd
gosh.
thing that my sister told me this. She says, "You know what you said, Lynette?" And that was strange because this is how many years
Wow.
later? 4 years later. And it's not like he's like in my mind or anything. It was
Right.
really
Right.
interesting. So anyway, I ended up in a psychiatric ward, 72-hour hold on me. And so that was quite an experience because as a court reporter working in the court system, or the judge that I worked for would place people there. So to go to a place like this, it was like, okay, here I am.
Wow.
So I did that. And then I got out. My family picked me up and they said, "We really think you need to go into a treatment center." And my daughter was looking up treatment centers. I signed my life away to her, power of attorney, everything, because I took care of the bills, and she was CPA, and
Okay.
gave her all my medical information. So she flew out from Hawaii and was studying for her CPA, gotten her master's degree, and working too, and then taking care of me. Her husband was so like, I just bless him for that, and so she
That's
really
truly a gift.
was there for me. Yes, for sure. And my son was really very good too. He would stop by and see me almost daily to see how I'm doing, but had no idea what was going on.
Right. Right.
Um, I think by this time, though, I knew it was the vaccine. I absolutely knew because I had read an Epic Times article about with Brienne, and that was quite a bit before. And I thought, that's exactly what I've got. I know it's the
Right.
vaccine. There was nobody to talk to about this. So anyway, after the psych ward that I went to for the 72 hours, I went into a treatment center. And while I was there, I also tried to take my life. And then they didn't, nobody knew. And I stopped myself. And I did report to somebody that I'm still feeling suicidal. So they transferred me to another psych ward in another city. So I was there for about 4 days. And then I had a psychiatrist interview, and in 10 minutes he says, "Oh, I see you're crying a lot. You're bipolar," and prescribed me Depakote and Seroquel, and yeah. So
Some,
anyway, then after that, they said that the original treatment center would not take me because they had a COVID. They had, I guess somebody got COVID, which I don't know if that's true. I know I was very needy, and I wanted to constantly talk to people and say, "Am I going to get better?" I was just frantic. So I think I was just a pain for them. So anyway, I ended up going to this other treatment center north of Los Angeles. And I was there for 5 weeks, and there were about 5 or 6 girls coming and going. And most of it was from drugs and alcohol. And they were recovering, and they were doing their mental health on the recovery. There were a few others who were there for suicide attempts. So as time went on, I was very open about the vaccine, and they did not like that. And I was told I can't bring that up ever again. And even in a therapy group, and one time I brought it up and I got written up, put on probation.
oh,
And there was one gal in there, and I know that I was very trying to these people. I understand they're trying to get healed themselves, and they've got somebody who is just, crying all the time and just different.
right.
And as a matter of fact, one of the gals had a talk with me one morning and said, "Lynette, nobody wants you here. You are different from the rest of us." She goes, "I really do think it could be the vaccine." And at the beginning, she was like, "No way." She says, "You need to find someplace else that you're going to get help for this." And
Isn't
I was,
that, I mean, that's just what struck me. Like, here you are struggling, struggling, doing whatever you can. And you have somebody saying, we don't want you here. I mean, I suppose it was some relief to hear, yeah, we don't we think it is the vaccine, but just again, none of this needed to happen to
Right.
you or anyone else had
Right.
our government just been honest and told people, hey, be aware this might happen. And, hopefully then find treatments for it. But anyway, I'm sorry, please continue.
Oh, well, that's okay. So the one gal who was very much a bully with me, she one morning after the 5 weeks, I just had enough, and we were in our therapy group, and she said something to me, and I finally told her to fuck off. And the whole therapy group got
Sweet
all,
little Lynette,
oh
what
yes.
got into you?
And even the therapist, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. And I'm like, have they not had therapy before or been in therapy groups before? Because that's something that's, done. So anyway, I called my daughter and my husband and I said, I'm coming home. That's is it. The reason I did not want to leave was because I was afraid I was going to kill myself. I had constant feelings of wanting to kill myself. Everything was frightening to me. In the mornings, I would look out the window and I would see the beautiful oak trees, but it wasn't beautiful. It was frightening.
Yeah,
Everything was frightening.
you actually write a poem. You share a few poems at the end of at the end of your book. And you say that you say awakening to open eyes, I realize once again the fragility of which I feel, and you go on, and I close my eyes hoping the brokenness will go away, but to no avail. And so, but again, I want this story to be encouraging because you found hope and you got
Yes,
past it. So
yes.
please continue.
Okay, so while I was in the treatment centers, my husband had put up our house for sale, and we had come out to Florida because we'd planned on moving to Florida anyway because our daughter and son-in-law were being transferred here.
Right,
So it was a good thing that I wasn't at home while they were packing because I couldn't handle it. But it's this this injury makes you feel so overwhelmed, light, sensitive to sound, any kind of chaos. You can't handle it. Um, I lost my closest friend of 25 to 30 years
right,
because I couldn't handle being around her, and she was very just not accepting and very judgmental, and so I had to let her go. But I did have some really really nice people who were like, Lynette, what's going on? Any if you need to come last minute or whatever. Um, so
and that
that's
would really be, I would think the advice to anybody who's listening in who is around someone who's vaccine injured is just to be a good listener, and to listen to
right.
those. So then, yeah, if you could continue to let us know how you got to Florida, because it was in Florida that
Yes,
you found help at the
yes.
Aviv Clinic. So if you can tell us how you got there.
Well, it was so everything seemed so divine. When I was in California, I was looking for a doctor, primary care doctor, and I just happened to call this number of a naturopath, and she says, I can't practice in Florida, but I do know somebody who is an actual MD who practices, like helps with the thyroid and that kind of thing, because that was a big issue for me. And she gave me the name of Dr. Maravik Villa. So when we had come out to Florida, before I tried to take my life, we went to Dr. Villa, and Dr. Villa right away, she says, you are vaccine injured. I know it, I can see it. I've had so many. I deal with people with long COVID. I deal with people with vaccine injury. And I know this is what it is, but I'm going to give you tests to take back to California. So your insurance covers it, and we'll do a telemed. So while we were out here, we had purchased a home, and in the neighborhood, our uh, one of our neighbors across the street was talking to us, or talking to my husband, I should say. And my husband told her what I was going through, and she says, "You ought to try this Aviv clinics. They're helping long COVID." And my husband and I are going through it. My husband is, it seems like he's losing memory, and that's what we're here for. So we decided to go over there. during that week we were here, and we went over, and I was in tears and talking to Dr. Mo, and he says, well, we haven't done the research on the vaccine, but we have on long COVID. We have research that it's healing long COVID people. And I would suggest you look at YouTube, and and we've got the research here. You can find the research and some stories. So I did that. I researched it. I looked on YouTube for a gentleman named Patrick Bowl, who I think he went to the one in Dubai, the Aviv clinic in Dubai, and he is from the Netherlands, and he was healed. And the way they explained it is about the stem cells and this certain protocol that they use to make those stem cells heal. So I thought, this is going to work. But the whole idea of moving to Florida was so overwhelming. I think that was a lot of the reason why I was like, I can't even go there. I can't go to Florida. I'm done with life, you know.
Wow.
So, but as it turns out, we had sold our home. I got out of the treatment center. We went up to Lake Arrowhead, where my aunt and uncle had let us rent an Airbnb, and we were there. My daughter was out from Hawaii, watching over me, and then our appointment with Dr. Villa came, and we did the telemed, and she absolutely said, your cytokines are so high, you're also showing Epstein-Barr virus. This is from the vaccine. And she
Must
says,
have
you're
been some sort of relief. I mean, it's not great news, but at least it's like, I'm not crazy.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, it was. Although my family would not believe it. Not at all. Not at all. They would not believe it. And so what
So
did
what did
make
that
them,
do to you inside?
they just thought she was a kook, and no, it's not that. And so, but the thing that happened was when we got to Florida, which was a hard thing for me to finally get here, I had a meltdown afterwards, after my daughter and I got off the plane and my husband picked us up, and but then calmed down. So we moved into our new home, and then I went for my testing at Aviv clinics. And the thing that gave me validation and proved to my family and friends who did not believe me were the brain scans. And it came out that I had damage to the frontal lobe and the basal ganglia. And it was long COVID, and whether from the virus or the vaccine. And that's how Aviv Clinics looks at it. I know a lot of people are really like, either they
But wait,
wanted,
you never had COVID.
I never had COVID until
Okay.
I had it this year of all times. Very,
Okay,
very
after
mild.
you've been healed. Okay.
I had never had COVID.
So it was the test showed that this did happen from the vaccine.
Right. And I
Okay.
had been tested from Dr. Villa for COVID, and it showed nothing, that no antibodies, that I had no
Okay.
COVID. So anyway, that was the validation, is when Dr. Nat Alvarez said, this is how we know what you got. Your other blood tests are fine. Everything's fine. MRI's fine. Chest x-ray's fine. But your brain is damaged. That gave me great validation. So I did call my family, and a few of them, well, there weren't many, but few of them believed it. A couple would not believe it. Now most of them do. One of them still, I don't think, does. And she actually got stage 4 lung cancer after the booster and still will not believe it. And
but that's what we're dealing with.
yes.
If our government would just come out and say, again, I've said this again and again, in January of 2021, they knew that there were thousands of vaccine injuries happening. The NIH flew Bree and others who were injured out to the NIH in Maryland to study them, because they knew all of this was happening, and they have the emails. Yes, there are thousands of these injuries happening, promising that they would help them, that they would let the public know, but instead they literally silenced and abandoned them. And just
Yeah.
the utter tragedy. Your life is a perfect example, as all the other injured are too, that just the hope, I mean, with nobody believing you, and still,
Yeah.
even when you're giving them proof, no,
Right.
I never had COVID. Here's the brain injury. Here's this. And now let's talk about the
Okay.
healing that you
Yes.
received.
Going back to that just floors me that the NIH let them go. That is so bad. So bad. They could have continued helping them.
And helping others.
Yes, and they didn't.
And
It's
and
just
that would have, people are out there, oh, anti-vaxxers are causing vaccine hesitancy. No, 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 no. Because most of the people who are injured took the vaccine. So they clearly were not anti-vaxxers. They
right.
wanted to do it. They trusted the government. And had the government just said, had the NIH, the CDC just said, hey, we're having these issues. We want to let you know we're going to be here. We're studying this. We're making sure these people are helped, and then at least people could have been aware, had received informed consent. They could have made up their own mind, not had these
Yeah.
mandates. If they were, I mean, the blame of vaccine hesitancy cannot be put anywhere but at the government itself for the way it has
Absolutely.
handled this. So
Absolutely.
anyway,
Yeah.
back to your story and you getting
So,
help.
yeah, so I went to Aviv clinics, and the real frustrating part that I feel for others is Aviv is very expensive. I was fortunate enough to have retired, had a pension. My husband has a pension, and we sold our home in California. So I was able to afford it. It is expensive. But it is a medical clinic that is hands-on and has four pillars to it. They're all the doctors, the medical personnel, everyone is there, right there for you all the time. It is a phenomenal clinic, but of course, we know it won't be FDA approved because big pharma would lose money, right? So it's really a travesty about these medical issues. This is a healing place. But
Yeah,
when I
talk about the
started,
exact treatment that you had that
okay,
brought the healing.
okay, so it was 3 months, Monday through Friday, 2 hours inside hyperbaric chamber. So it's a chamber that holds 13 people. I had uh, veterans, military veterans, where American Mighty Warriors was paying their way, who had PTSD and they had traumatic brain injury. There are people like who have other traumatic brain injury, like football players have gone there for concussions and traumatic brain injury, stroke, Lyme disease, fibromyalgia.
Oh.
So
Can you
there were,
explain for people who don't know what hyperbaric is? Can you
sure,
explain what that is?
sure. So it is, we call it dives because it's like diving, scuba diving. So my understanding is, I don't know the whole scientific concept,
Right.
except it's two atmospheres under pressure, medical grade oxygen. So we breathe 21% oxygen. When you're sitting in the chamber, you put your mask on, you're breathing 100% oxygen. The difference with Aviv's protocol versus most other hyperbarics is they do a protocol called hypoxia-induced factor, which won the Nobel Prize in 2019. And
Wow.
what they found was when the stem cells proliferate at birth and when you're dying. When you have a wound, your body sends a message to your stem cells saying, we need to heal this. So your stem cells release to heal it. So what happens is the idea is you're on the oxygen, the 100% oxygen for 20 minutes. There's a nurse in the chamber with you. The nurse says, okay, we're taking our masks off for 5 minutes. By taking that mask off for 5 minutes, you're going back to breathing 21% oxygen. That tells the stem cells, oh my gosh, you're dying.
Oh,
And so
interesting.
the stem cells start going. So you do this 4 times during each dive. So imagine doing that 60 days in a
Wow.
row. It causes those stem cells really, really to
Proliferate.
proliferate. And for long COVID, what we found is that, and for me, the real healing came after I finished the dives.
That was really interesting to me when you said that, that it wasn't so much that you noticed it during the time, but
Right.
after the time.
Yes. So it was about 2.5 weeks after, and I was at home, and I looked out my window one morning and I was like, oh my gosh, my world isn't distorted. It looks the same as it did. So that was the first clue. And I had no idea it was it was like that. It's like so, and then after that, I got cognition, the cognition came back, the organization, because we had moved into a new home. I was starting to unpack boxes. I was able to unpack a little bit more. I was shopping for furniture.
Wow.
I was cooking.
Your
The other,
family must have been ecstatic.
they were like, they couldn't believe it. So I think the hardest thing for me was to have this was, of course, the suicidal feelings, but also I was totally disconnected emotionally. And
To
I'm a very
before you're talking about before you got the treatment.
yes.
Right, okay.
I had no connection to God. I couldn't feel like, what a beautiful lake or what a beautiful tree. I couldn't, had no feeling or feeling about speaking with somebody, had no connection at all. That was really, really bothersome. That came back. So I would say at 3 months, it was very interesting because Aviv interviewed me and I felt like I was back and I had my first interview and I was like, this is amazing. I feel like I'm back. My life is back. But then I had an interview, I think at 6 months or maybe longer. And I look back every month and I go, oh my gosh, I'm better than last month. I'm better than last month.
Wow.
Even
And you
at
haven't
a
had any more treatment since that time?
just recently they had a special that for 20 days. And
Okay,
so a bunch of us got together, some friends got together and we went through it. So
okay.
I went through it and it's hard to tell if it's done anything. I also had knee surgery on my meniscus recently. So it's hard to tell, with
But
that fixed,
you
but
you were able be in between those 2 times, like every month you perceived, I mean, you seem to be getting better. Your world got stronger and clearer.
absolutely. And they say they're from a ViV study, it continues on up to they have the study up to 2 years. It could be longer than that where it heals. I can show you. So let me see if I can get this on here.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
Ah, okay. So these are my brain scans. I think
Right.
I'm okay.
Yeah, I can see it. And also everybody, it's in the book too.
Oh, it's in the book. So there's the ones at the top are September 2022.
Right.
The colors are the function of the brain. The red and white and pink are real good. Yellow's good. Green's okay. Blue is damaged. Black is dead. If I had black in my brain, they couldn't help me. So I have blue in the frontal lobe, which shows that, and it also went into the basal ganglia, which probably was the cause of the tremors and convulsions and the emotional, the lack of emotion. The second brain scan or SPEC scan was January 8, 2024, which is over a year.
Oh,
Ah,
we
where'd it
just
go?
lost you.
Where'd it go? There it is. And the damage is gone.
That's
So
incredible.
it really
That's
is. It's
incredible.
like when people say they can't heal from brain injury, this is a medical breakthrough that I talk about a little bit in my book about why aren't psychiatrists doing this and
Right.
instead of diagnosing after 15 minutes and sending them giving patients
S-
medications
Absolutely.
if there's brain damage or the football players, uh,
Right.
the veterans, the for PTSD because they're seeing PTSD cellularly in the brain. So it's
So,
really
I mean,
healing,
there's so many ways that this could bring healing to so many.
right?
And as you and others get more healing, and maybe this becomes out, more and more. That's why we need to talk about it. That's why you need to do anybody who asks you to do an interview, you need to do it because any audience that you can get in front of to number one, bring hope,
Right,
and then bring attention to these new treatments that
right,
yes, others have been, oh, that's just alternative medicine. That's, what, well, you clearly are an example of a complete turnaround of a life. You
right.
know, it's really
And
something. The one thing and you and I talked about this briefly. in that I heard other people who've, said they've done hyperbaric and it really didn't help or this or that. And I think we have to make it really clear is the intensity of like the chamber you were in. I talked about, I shared with you how my daughter, this was 12 years ago, out of nowhere started having seizures, and she started on the ketogenic diet
Right.
for epilepsy, which is like not what the ketogenic diet is to most people. It's like you're basically eating 90% fat. But and it was so particular. Like the person, the dietitian I worked with, she even had a client that the daughter was doing fine, but they'd go to the lake house and she'd start having seizures. Well, it turns out there are carbohydrates in sunscreen. So it's
Oh,
super, super
see?
sensitive. But
Wow.
once you get it down, because we had her seizures relatively under control, and then they all came raging back. And I mean, it was literally because I added a little extra lemon juice, I think, or I changed from coconut oil to fish. I mean, it was,
Uh,
but once we got it down, and she
mm,
was on the diet for 2 years, and she's never had a seizure since. So,
that's
so,
wonderful.
but
Wonderful.
but people say, oh, we tried the diet, but it didn't work. And it's not that I don't believe them, but
Sure.
I also know it's so sensitive. But when you hit that
Right.
sweet spot, it works. And maybe it's just that the hyperbaric that you used was that at that intensity, like the same intensity
Sure.
my daughter needed to be at in ketosis. So
Right.
for people who've tried hyperbaric and maybe did not have success, I would encourage you um, to just not write it off, and maybe there's hope
Mhm.
yet still for you. And I don't know if
I
there's
know.
anything, you could add to all of that.
Well, I have spoken to a couple of people who are doing it, in a different place. They're not coming down here to Florida. One of them is in New York, and, he is trying it with the mono chamber, the hypoxia-induced factor, which is great. So I don't know how he's doing, but I had to keep telling him, "You're not gonna see results until later. So you've got to remember that. You may not see it till 6 months later." So it
That's so
could be very
important to know.
frustrating where you could say, "Oh, it doesn't work for me." Well, you're right, it's the intensity. Also at Aviv, they add cognitive exercises while you're in the chamber. They do physical therapy, nutrition, and to keep your inflammation down and really, make you as healthy as possible. So, that's added on there too, but, yeah, I think so, and, like, a diet like that is so strict. I think a lot of people cannot stick to it.
Well, but if you know that there's hope at the end,
Right.
it is. I mean, that's what I would get. In fact, we started a website and it's still up, because I would, here I was at the Cleveland Clinic, which is supposed to be, the best place in the whole world there for pediatric epilepsy. And of
Mhm.
course we didn't, we, well, I don't to just say that there were parents there. I'm like, hey, there was a mom there. She'd been in there 5 times in like the last couple of years, and I'm like, have you ever tried this diet? And she's like, oh, I think it'd just be really hard. You got to drink cream. And I'm thinking to myself, and this isn't hard, being in the
Yeah,
hospital for your fifth time,
right.
and so yes, it's hard,
Uh-huh.
but it's not too hard if
Right.
you know that there's hope. I mean,
True.
if you're
If you're
getting
at the
if you're
yes.
having if your seizures have stopped while you're on it, I mean, right there, that gives you hope. And then
Right.
just, I mean, we were fortunate that, after 2 years, we went off and she's never had a problem since. And she's
Wow.
back to eating,
Oh, that's so
Pizza Hut and Dairy
great.
Queen.
Oh, that's
Sometimes I'm not.
awesome.
But what I'm saying is that what if we had just, I mean, we were sent home with, $1,500 worth of meds and a still seizing daughter. And it's just like, oh,
Yes,
well, they'll find the chemical cocktail that'll work for her. And, my
sure.
doctor I loved our doctor. And he's like, and people are going to think you're crazy. And I'm like, well, you'd be crazy too if this was happening to your child. And so
Yeah.
it's just that perseverance. Like
Yes, it is.
Lynette, you were willing to do anything. You're
I
like, I'll do
was.
anything. I'll do anything. And it's just finding that place that helps. And yes, you're right. The cost is
Mhm.
prohibited. So we have to continue to work with, I do a lot of outreach with politicians helping, elect officials, elect candidates that are
Okay.
understand these issues and can bring help. And
Oh,
that's why
that's
we need to continue to work on the legislative end to
right.
make sure that people like you and others can get this help. And who
Right.
should be paying for that? The pharmaceutical companies, not the
Right.
taxpayers. So
Absolutely.
this is
Yeah.
a really big discussion. I mean, we've covered a lot of
Yeah.
territory here. But so now life is back to normal?
Life's great. I just have my knee I'm nursing. But yeah, I went back to, I don't know if you've heard of Orange Theory. It's a workout place where like half an hour cardio. It's pretty intense. So I'm back to the hit training after I get my knee squared away, teaching yoga. And I volunteer with To Aviv. I help them like help people who are going through what I'm doing. And I do get quite a few people who call me and I give them my number and they'll call me in the morning and say, Lynette, I'm really depressed and I don't know. And they're going through the same thing I was. There's a lady
No.
vaccine and same thing. So I talk to her, get her through the morning. So that's what I'm doing right now is God's given me this amazing purpose. And it's just everything was so divine in this. I can say, and if I did not go through this, the biggest thing is I would not be here today. There's no way I could have kept myself alive. I was so, yeah, and that tells me, like with football players and with veterans who commit suicide, which we all of us together talked about this. We all were supportive of each other and talked about the feelings of suicide we felt. There was another man there who I don't know if it was from the virus or the vaccine for long COVID, and he had tickets to, I believe, Switzerland to be euthanized. So it's there, and it's the part of the brain that gives you the will to live. It's not depression. Oh, you need some medication. It is that part of the brain. And that's what's damaged. And so many people who are going through this with the vaccine injury, I'm sure are feeling the same way. And it's horrific. It's terrible.
And that you now, having lived through both sides of this, again, the hope that you can bring to others.
I hope.
And I know your story is going to be used. I do want to encourage everybody to, check out this book. I've got a bunch of things in it. Um, share it with others. People, this doesn't have to be about vaccine injury because your story is way more than that. The healing that took place could help way more people than just that. And then, yeah, and I'll put in the show notes. You've done a couple other interviews. I'll put links to that, your email if people want to connect with you. And so I just so appreciate you being willing. I just so appreciate that you didn't give up, or that the Lord didn't allow you, that the Lord
Yeah.
didn't allow you.
Yeah, there was a
Because
reason.
I just know that people are going to be helped through this and through
I
your
hope
life
so.
experience and the hope that you are trying to bring every single day to others.
Well, you too, Anne. I mean,
I'm just telling the
I
stories.
wouldn't be here if you weren't here. So thank you for bringing this to light. It's
Well,
really amazing.
team humanity, right? Team
Right.
humanity.
Team
Lyn-
humanity.
Lynette, thank you so much.
Thank
Everybody else, check out
you.
the show notes and spread the word of hope.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you too, Anne.